what's happening, you guys? Welcome back to Let's Go Win podcast. We are going to be talking about bucket lists today. And I mean, everyone has them to a degree, but maybe you haven't thought of it for a while. Maybe you have something that you've been thinking about and you just haven't decided to move on it. That is what this conversation is all about. I am so excited for you guys to listen to what Jeremy is his name. I'm going to bring him on shortly, what he's created and how many lessons come from it. Jeremy George is an entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and bucket list enthusiast. A few years ago, he embarked on a mission to cross off 52 bucket list goals in 52 weeks. From cliff jumping in Hawaii to biking down the California coast to overcoming stage fright, Jeremy's year-long adventure was about pushing limits to rediscover his purpose in life. Now, as the founder of BucketMatch, he's built a platform that connects like-minded people to help each other conquer their bucket lists. Well, Jeremy, what is happening, brother? I got to say, as I told you off air, I have a bit of envy of the thing that you've built because this makes so much sense. And yet it takes somebody thinking, you know what? I'm going to go do something for a year and I'm going to discover life. And now I'm going to allow others. What a cool concept, brother. Tell me how you even dreamed this thing up.
Yeah, thanks, Jam. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Very excited to be here. Excited for the conversation. And yeah, I appreciate the sentiment. It is a really fun project to work on, fun company to build. And, the truth is the inspiration actually comes from a darker place. And so, I'm sure we'll get there. But the company that I've started, BucketMatch, it's an online platform. It connects people based on their bucket list goals. So very simply, the idea is you go into BucketMatch, you create an account, you write down everything you want to do before you die. And then our job is to go and algorithmically find other people within the platform that might be able to help you out in some way. So maybe it's a friend of yours that has that same goal as you, or maybe it's a total stranger, but someone who's actually just recently crossed off that goal and they can kind of show you the ropes of how to do it, or an expert. So like a service provider, someone who actually like runs that tour or is a guitar teacher, whatever it is that you're trying to do, that, you might be able to pay them to actually cross off that goal.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off if you had more on it. I'm imagining a community where you're like, because I went on briefly and looked at it, and one of the books I read, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying,
yeah,
they talk about one of their big things is I regret not living the life that I feel I was meant to live. Like this is a major thing for people. And so you're facilitating, curating, connecting people to say, look, dude, don't be lying on your deathbed saying, I wish I had. Let's get this stuff done and let's not wait. I mean, is that the overall premise and idea of like, let's get some of these logistics out of the way. Let's connect you with cool people that can guide you. Go do it together. It sounds like you and another guy maybe did one of your bucket list things back in 2019 together.
Yeah. I mean, so that's exactly it. You mentioned the 5 regrets of dying. There have been countless studies done on folks who are, at the end of their lives or in hospice care, nurses that are in the emergency room. There was one study done in particular done at Cornell University that found that 76% of people laying on their deathbed, when they're reflecting back on their life, 76% are more likely to regret the things they did not do, not the things that they did, right? So that means we don't really regret like the mistakes we made or the stupid things that we did or any of our failures. We're far more likely to regret not taking more risks, not, loving more authentically, not pursuing that like creative idea that you had that you always just kind of put off. Those are the things that we regret. And the reality is we all have one life here, right? And so, and that hit really deeply for me. My story is, so 2019, as you mentioned, pre-COVID, I was in many ways like at the top of what I thought should have been like the top of my life, top of my career. I just got a promotion at work. I was living in New York City at the time, beautiful apartment, making more money than I'd ever made before. And the truth is, when I hit those milestones and I realized I wasn't any happier, that actually set me into a year-long struggle where I started to question, is happiness even attainable? I genuinely thought that I was just going to continue chasing whatever this next rung was, but that I would never actually be happy. And so I began to struggle with suicidal ideation. I didn't really want to be here anymore because I thought if that's what life is, then what's the point? But then a series of things happened that sort of, forced me to confront that mortality. The first was December 2019. My mom went in to get back surgery. We expected it to be a, relatively routine back surgery, as routine as surgeries can go. But it actually ended up going very poorly. I wake up to a call from my dad the next morning saying, "Hey, Jeremy, mom's in the ICU. She went under cardiac arrest."
Take your time, brother.
Excuse me. And I just remember, so I hopped on the next flight, the first flight I could find back home, and on that flight home, I just remember feeling so guilty that here my mom is fighting for her life, and here I was questioning whether or not I even wanted to be alive. But I was healthy, I was financially stable. I had great friends. I had all the reasons to be alive, yet I was questioning whether I wanted to do it. And so on that flight over, I was convicted to figure something out, to figure out a better path for myself. And thankfully, my mom's, she actually made a full recovery. She's alive. As my dad likes to say, we learned the lesson without the consequence. And then, of course, fast forward 2020, and I think we all know when COVID hit, everybody on the planet was forced to reconcile with the fact that life is fragile and it can be flipped upside down at any moment. And I think for many of us, we were forced to confront the reality of mortality in many ways. And then the final thing that happened is 3 months later, I got laid off from my job due to a COVID layoff. And so these three sort of milestone events happened. And I thought, you know what? I realized that the reason I was so unhappy and I didn't have a zeal for life is because I was chasing the wrong metrics. In pursuit of these vanity metrics, I was neglecting all these other things that I wanted to do or try during my lifetime. And I was reminded of the fact that at the end of our lives, we're more likely to regret the things we didn't try, not the things that we did. And so I decided that I would spend the next year deliberately pursuing my bucket list. Like you mentioned, I tried to do 52 things for my bucket list in 52 weeks. And it was an incredible experience. But at the end of that year, I had an opportunity to give a TEDx talk about that project. And what really blew me away was the sheer volume of people who reached out afterwards, sending me, DMs or even like text messages expressing similar sentiments, where they felt like they were kind of floating through life, but they weren't deliberately going after the things they wanted. And they were terrified that they would wake up someday and realize it was too late. And that's when I realized there's a very silent but pervasive problem here in society. And so, I started BucketMatch because I wanted to be a part of solving that. And the last thing I'll mention is the reason I think it's all about connection is there have been studies done on this, which is if you have a goal, if you write it down, just by writing it down, you're 42% more likely to achieve that goal. But then if you create a plan and you share that plan with a friend, you increase your likelihood by 77.6% of actually successfully achieving that goal. And anecdotally, I experienced that as well. When I was trying to do 52 things from my bucket list in 52 weeks, mind you, the thing on your bucket list means you've never done it before. So I was constantly having to relearn and relearn and relearn. I actually made it a rule that for every single goal on my list, I had to recruit at least one person to try to help me out in some way, because I found that that was the number one indicator of whether I successfully achieved something or not. And you allow yourself to delegate work, you save time, possibly save money, but most importantly, it just becomes a hell of a lot more fulfilling. Because when you've got other people in your corner, it doesn't actually even matter whether you successfully achieve the thing or not. All that matters is that you go through it.
Brother, I mean, this is just resonating so hard because, well, many things. I would say this. The whole, what he talked about, the writing it down being, I think you said 42 point something percent. Yep. And then an additional 70 something percent by sharing it, writing out a plan and sharing it. That's what I call the mirror method, guys. So if you haven't heard me talk about this, Jeremy 100% just described what this is all about. And I love the accountability buddy is what I'll call it. Yeah. Even though, like you said, you may or may not accomplish the goal. That's oftentimes not even the point. The point is you have somebody that's going to be there with you to celebrate you. Or if you fall, fail, don't choose to, like cliff jumping in Hawaii. Let's just say Jeremy's on the cliff in Hawaii and he says, you know what? I know this is my bucket list, but I'm not feeling it. I'm not going to do it. Guess what? That accountability buddy's there to also say that's okay.
Mhm.
Because I think this is so, so important. Often we're so goal oriented. I got to do this, got to do that. Sometimes, look, it's just considering it, even moving towards that step. Perhaps that buddy on the cliff with you ends up being a lifelong, friend, even though you didn't do it. And I know you probably did it, but I'm just giving an example. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
I'd love to hear about a couple of those adventures you had,
totally.
what you learned on that 52-week journey of, I'm sure there was good, bad, ugly. It's a year-long deal. You're going to have some awesome, you're going to have some shit, and you're going to have some like, it wasn't what I thought it was. How did that look for you? Was it amazing for 52 weeks, or did you have some ups and downs?
No, I mean, yeah, as you said, right? Of course, nothing is a straight line, and it wasn't always incredibly exciting. It was incredibly challenging at times too. One thing I always like to preface with is I think when people typically hear the word bucket list, they immediately think of epic, travel and adventure, right? So like skydiving, climbing Mount Everest, going to see Machu Picchu, and those are certainly things that I think if they matter to you, they should be on your bucket list. But I also just like to emphasize that a bucket list can literally be anything, right? It's just a list of anything you want to do before you die. And it should speak to you in some way. And that's the most important thing. So while I did have, I wanted to go see the Northern Lights, cliff jumping in Hawaii, as you mentioned, I did have some of those epic things. I also had really simple things on my list. Like I wanted to handwrite a thank you letter, something I hadn't done probably since I was, in elementary school, because everything's over email now. So I really wanted to handwrite a thank you letter. I wanted to meditate every single day for 10 minutes a day for 90 days. They say, 30 days to create a habit, 90 days to create a lifestyle. So that was really important to me. I paid for a stranger's meal. When I was in college, a complete stranger paid for my meal once when I forgot my wallet. I always wanted to return that favor. And so, my list had a wide variety. But as you mentioned, yeah, I also did some pretty challenging things. I biked down the California coast from San Francisco to San Diego, 650-mile bike ride, 10-day trip. I had all kinds of friends join me along the way. It was an incredible experience. I learned how to play guitar, and then I performed in front of an audience.
Wow.
I'd always wanted to sort of get over that stage fright that I had. And a good friend of mine, Mitchell, helped me, and I'm happy to share that story. But so for me, the year was really about pushing the edge of my comfort zone and continuing to expand the radius of my comfort zone little by little by trying to do something I had never done before, but I had always wanted to try.
Yeah.
So yeah, happy to share some of the lessons, but I guess just curious if there's any one particular story that you feel like would resonate.
I think there's beauty in the simple ones. And again,
Yeah.
obviously, the movie comes in the bucket list where I think of Jack Nicholson and
Morgan Freeman, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're going along and they're doing these epic things, and yet the beauty of the last part, kiss the most beautiful girl in the world, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was his granddaughter. And man, you want to talk about like, wow, that's what I think is beautiful about life and finding fulfillment, not in, yes, Machu Picchu, that's freaking awesome. And anybody that's been there, that's really incredible. And yet maybe that handwritten letter was something that was really impactful. There is a serious side of this. Like you talked about the suicide ideations that you had. You clearly got emotional thinking of your mom and the fact that she's wanting to live and yet she's going through this moment. Most of my audience knows I lost my dad to suicide. And so I have this perspective of I want to live every single day to the absolute most that I have. And that's the beauty that came from the way I lost my dad. And yet I don't want any family to go through that.
Yep.
So, brother, I would love to hear some of I don't care what it is. It could be big, it could be small, just examples where you're like, you know what? This really surprised me. This is what I got from it. And this is why I think attacking or even having a bucket list to look forward to is such an important thing for all of us to do, to have dreams. So I'd love to just hear kind of your take on that.
Yeah, totally. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm sure, your audience, there are folks that maybe silently or publicly, but are are dealing with that as well, right? They have a loved one that they've lost. And I think having done this once my TEDx talk came out, and it was really the first time I had publicly spoken about my suicidal ideation. I think just by normalizing that conversation, it's so critical. It's something that I think I personally tried to tackle on my own, and I wouldn't advise that. I actually think that was the wrong thing to do. Thankfully, of course, I'm still here and I found a way out of it. But for anyone who's listening, I hope you'll find the courage to speak with someone. And my DMs are always open. So I'll share a few different stories because every single one kind of captures every lesson. Before I do that, I guess the quick is, in my TEDx talk, I talk about 5 lessons that I learned from my year trying to do a bunch of things I'd never done before. And so very quickly, those 5 lessons are: number 1, confront mortality. And what I mean by that is just confront the fact that we will all die someday, right? And I think, JM, in your case, you mentioned your father passing and taking his own life. That's what has really sparked this conviction in you to live every day fully. For me, I had a similar thing. Often I find that it actually, unfortunately, we wait until the passing of someone, the end of something, to realize, oh man, we should have done it sooner. So do your best while we're still here and alive and healthy to confront the end, and then allow that to give you clarity. I think in some ways people think it's so morbid to think about death. I actually think it's incredibly empowering. I think when you truly envision what you're going to think about when you are at the end of your life, it gives you so much clarity on the things that you're worried about today that actually matter, and the things that you're worried about today that don't matter at all. So that would be the first of it. I like to add a little asterisk there for college students when I chat with them. Maybe death feels too far away, but then think about like the end of college, right? Or think about, the next milestone. If you're about to have a kid, there are certain eras within your life that you will never get back again. And what you don't want to do is wait until the end of that to regret having not done, certain things that you want to. And then number 2 is to catalog your dreams. So once you've thought about what it is that you really want to do, catalog it. And that's not just write it down. That means, add pictures, videos, quotes, journal entries, whatever it is, to really bring those ideas to life, because that's what actually ultimately will give you the conviction and the excitement when the going gets tough, to keep pushing towards whatever this goal is. Number 3 is to recruit a partner. So I've already talked a little bit about this, but Jam, you've talked about it as well. The importance of having someone who, at least in its simplest form, is an accountability buddy. But what you'll really find when you start sharing your goals with the world is that people from all walks of life are going to want to help. And so I'll share some stories around that. Number 4 was to set SMART parameters. So SMART being an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. It just helps to have some concrete understanding of what does it mean for me to actually achieve this goal. For example, in BucketMatch, I see a lot of people that will say, I want to learn how to speak Spanish. That's a great goal. But the challenge is like, well, how do you know when you've crossed that off, right? Is it when you're able to say 3 words in Spanish? Is it whenever you're able to speak for 15 minutes? Is it when you're able to like deliver a dissertation in Spanish, right? Like just give some clarity around what does it mean to have achieved this goal. So you want to set objective parameters. And then number 5, which I actually think is the most important, is celebrate failure. Yes. By doing something you've never done before, I can almost guarantee you're going to fail the first time you try, right? And so when you celebrate that failure or that rejection, whatever it is, you start to remove yourself from the outcome and you're much more invested in the process, right? If you fail, that means you tried. And that's a win, right? Like that should be celebrated in and of itself. And I think too many of us, especially as we're get older as adults, it's kind of terrifying to be a complete beginner or a novice at something. And the more, high achieving you are, the harder that is, because you're so used to being a top executive or, the best in your field, whatever it is, that to be completely shitty at something is like really uncomfortable. So celebrate failure, because then you'll become addicted to the process, not the outcome.
Well, brother, I love the list. I have to talk about a couple of them, and maybe I can get you to confront mortality. All right. I will tell you guys, if you've listened to me long enough, I don't believe in regret. That is a philosophy of mine. Does that mean I don't regret things that I've done? Of course I do. However, I'm not going to dwell on it, right? And I'll give you an example. My dad and I talked about going fly fishing in New Zealand for years, fishing up in Alaska for years. And here's the point I want to give you guys. I made every reason at some point I was having a child. Business was too busy. It just wasn't the right time. So dad and I didn't do it. Here's the shitty part. I'm never going to be able to do that with my dad. I will never experience fishing with my dad for brown trout in New Zealand, which we've talked about. I can't tell you how many times. I don't want anybody to feel that way. And I think that's the idea of bucket match, right? And so while I say I don't believe in regret, I will go do these things. It just won't be with the partner, the person I wanted to share it with. And I don't want anybody to feel that way. So if you're like your mom and you've talked about going to Ireland for 10 years, don't wait. Like, let's get it done, get moving on it. And I think what you lined out is so important to help people actually accomplish these. So talk to me about confronting mortality. What did that look like for you, where you were like, okay, yep, this was the aha, this was the light bulb moment where it really has sunk in for me?
Yeah. So April 2019 was when I first had the thought of, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be on this planet anymore. And then it was about a year until, COVID came to the United States, March of 2020. And through that year, it was just kind of building up this feeling of like, I don't really want to be here anymore, but it never became something that I was actively pursuing. It was sort of this numbness of like, I just don't want to be alive. But I knew that I wasn't going to take my own life. And then in March of 2020, of course, when COVID hit and all the things happened, as I mentioned to you, I realized that, I was so fixated on like, I wish I could just not wake up tomorrow, that I started to ask myself, well, why don't we flip that? Let's reframe that question. If I was to die tomorrow, what are the things I would regret that I didn't do yet? And that's what brought me back to my bucket list. I started my bucket list when I was a freshman in college. So I was 19 years old. It'd been almost 10 years after the fact. And I hadn't looked at it in a while. And so I reread that list and it reinvigorated in me this sense of enthusiasm that I hadn't felt for a very long time. And it's not because I had like a super cool bucket list, right? It was just because everything that was on there was a piece of me. It was authentic to who I am. I believe that a true bucket list is the most authentic reflection of who we are and who we want to become. And so rereading that list got me excited about life again. And so that's when I realized that I should go do this thing. Now, of course, the things I cared about when I was 19, many of them were very different than what I cared about when I was 28. So I did change some things off my list. I rewrote it. And that's one thing I like to emphasize as well. A lot of folks come to me and say, well, hey, like, I don't know what I'm going to care about in 10 years or whatever it is. That's okay. You can change it, right? It's your bucket list. So that's what gave me the conviction to go do these things. And I think, the question of like, if you were to die tomorrow, what would you regret? Feels so intense. Like it's such an intense question for anyone to sort of contemplate on a random Tuesday. But as I mentioned before, I think the more comfortable you can become with mortality, the better clarity you'll have. And at least for me, feeling like someone who was on my deathbed, metaphorically in many ways, even though I wasn't physically there, mentally I was on my deathbed. It gave me the exact clarity that I needed.
Yeah, I love what you said about your true bucket list is really the most authentic. I'm paraphrasing now what you said, but it's really being authentic. And I want everybody to hear this. And this is literally, I'm selfishly plug in the self community. This is why I developed the self community, guys, because Jeremy is literally, go back for a moment, think of this young guy that's crushing it financially. He's in a very vibrant city at New York. Everything on the outside looks awesome. And he's like, dude, this fucking sucks. I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
That's real life for a lot of people right now. And I think that's okay to be okay saying that and say, you know what? What do I authentically want? This is such a big question. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. And like I said, I'm so glad you're doing something about it to help people achieve these, to feel alignment and fulfillment, I guess, are the two words that are really coming to me. So it sounds like you did catalog your dreams in college, and then talk to me more about that. So obviously you said some were there, but it changes as I got older. Mm-hmm. What did cataloging your dreams, what does that look like? You have a journal that you're always doing, or how are you doing this?
Yeah, for sure. So So I took a look at the list, right? I changed some things up. I had over 250 things on that list, actually.
Wow.
So I had written down a lot of stuff. And then I said, okay, well, if I'm going to put some structure on it, I've got 1 year to do this thing. I sort of arbitrarily just said, well, there's 52 weeks in a year. I'll pick 52 goals. There wasn't a lot of science behind it. That was basically it. And so I went through and I just picked out the 52 that spoke to me in some way in that moment, right? For whatever reason, I didn't overthink it too much. And then I put those on a separate sheet. And then for each, each goal on my list, I created a separate document where I tried to write down what was my inspiration for this thing. Why was this important to me? So, as an example, like what I wanted to bike down the California coast since I was in college because I had driven that path many, many times. I lived in the Bay Area. I went to school in San Diego, but I never really stopped to appreciate it. And I thought I want to actually like immerse myself. It's one of the most beautiful coastlines in the world, and I've taken it for granted for so long. And so I wrote that down, and then I found YouTube videos of other people who had done that same route and captured all the most beautiful parts of it. And I put that in. I found someone who had never actually done that ride before, and he documented his whole journey, everything from his training experience to his diet plan to like the actual road that he took. And I put that all together. And so I really built, essentially a vision board around like, what does this goal mean to me? And same with, meditation, right? I wanted to meditate for 90 days, as I mentioned, 90 days to create a lifestyle. And so meditation was something that was important to me. And so I wanted to really make sure that I had a mentally strong brain. One of the things I learned through researching suicidal ideation was that I had been taking care of my body physically really well, but I hadn't been doing a good job of taking care of my brain. And, I go to the gym pretty often, but I wasn't really going to the gym for my mind. And so that was really important to me. And so, meditating every day for 90 days is actually very hard. For some people, maybe it's easy for others, but when you have a really strong why behind it, it becomes a hell of a lot easier. So that's what I mean when I say, catalog your dreams.
Love it. Did you, so 90 days meditation, because for me, it's like that's a non-negotiable in my life, right? I'm going to do it every single day.
Yep.
Did that end up being a lifestyle for you, or was it like, you know what, I did it, I wasn't feeling what I really wanted to feel? Again, this is I think part of what I want to get to. I'm not saying you failed on this, but I'm just curious. Was it like, you know what, this isn't all it cracked up to be. So now I'm not going to do it. Like, what was that for you specific to meditation? And then let's get into celebrating failure, because I agree with you. I think of all the things, this is what I talk about the most. I love that you brought this up, and I can't wait to go listen to your TED Talk to hear your example, but I'd love to get a snippet of it here.
Yeah, let's do it. So in terms of for meditation, so it's on my calendar every day. 8:15, that's the first thing, or after I've walked my dog, after I've had my coffee, I meditate, and then I get into work. It's still something I have to put on my calendar, right? So like something I like to emphasize with folks is it's a continuous process. In many ways, I think for me, brushing my teeth, that's not something I necessarily put on my calendar. That's been ingrained in me for a while. Meditation for me is still an active process, but I'm giving myself these signals as these reminders to incorporate it into my day. But it has gotten to the point where if I haven't meditated, by the end of the day, I can feel it, right? If I skipped my meditation, and that's something I'm really proud of. The way I was able to succeed in that, actually, because I tried a few times during my year and I would break the cycle. I'd get 7 days in, 15 days in, whatever. The way I finally broke it was actually, so a little bit of a story time here, but one of the goals on my bucket list was to pick a country blindfolded and take a trip there. So that was something, it appealed to a sort of more adventurous, risk-taking side of me. My dad is a travel writer, so I grew up my whole life traveling. The asterisk here is that because we were doing it when the world was still coming out of COVID, there were a lot of travel restrictions. So a lot of countries were actually like restricted from United States people traveling to. So it was a smaller list. We couldn't look at the entire globe. Nonetheless, I was able to recruit 2 of my friends to join. And the rule was we had to pick a country and then be there within 48 hours. Luckily, we landed on Costa Rica, which is probably the lottery winner in many ways that we could have picked. But we picked Costa Rica. 48 hours, we're in Costa Rica. While we're there, one of my buddies on the trip, I was explaining and kind of sharing my bucket list project, told them everything on my list. But he said, hey, meditation. Like, I've been meditating. I've been using the Headspace app. I've been using the Calm app, but very similar. I said, oh, that's awesome. Like, would you want to do this together? Absolutely. 2 days later, we meet a different group of guys and we become close friends with them. I'm sharing my bucket list idea. And one of the other guys says, hey, I've been also like meditating every single day. He had actually been going for over 100 days already. So that's when I knew, okay, this guy's name is Rob Valentine. Shout out Rob. I knew that I was going to lean on Rob to be my rock for this. And so we finished Costa Rica, but we're still every single day we're, checking in on each other, meditating. And then after the trip, we started a group text, and we would text each other every single day after we had completed our meditation. If it wasn't for those guys, there's no way I would have, maybe not no way, but it would have been much harder for me to actually do 90 days consecutively. But having that group of buddies that were just genuinely interested and also attacking the same thing I was, that was critical.
Dude. Yeah, you did you picked one of my 3 favorite countries in the world. And did you knock out any other bucket list items there? Because there's a ton of cool shit to do in Costa Rica. Like
so much cool stuff.
So much cool stuff. Like it is, for people that haven't gone, this is such a sidetrack. Go to Costa Rica and just, if there's so many bucket list items you can literally probably do in Costa Rica, one of which I never knew. I grass boarded. The worst idea ever. Talk about a bucket fail. Like, dude, I got my ass kicked going down this mountain on a snowboard on grass. But you know what? Now I can say I did it. Anyway,
you did it.
I love that you found these people on your journey, and it's like now they're probably still people in your life that helped you accomplish this. And when you achieve that together, you bond in a way that, yes, we can get together as friends and we build these memories, but when you do something for the first time, maybe it's the dopamine and something ingrains, like, I'm going to remember this person for the rest of my life, whether they stay in contact or not.
Yeah.
I have to imagine that's part of your journey. And I hate to keep interjecting as much, but I'm just so fascinated on this. Was that your experience with these guys? Are you still in touch with a lot of them since the Costa Rica trip?
Yeah, with all of them. I think that, I think you nailed it. I think we crave novelty in many ways. And when you do something new or you do something for the first time, a quote that I love, if anyone here has done a Tough Mudder or familiar, the quote that they ask you, or the question they ask you at the beginning is, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And I think that's a fantastic way to sort of like think about, your life and stretching the edge of your comfort zone. But at least for me personally, when I'm like really pursuing something that I care about, the people that are a part of that journey, I open myself up to them in a way that I don't think I necessarily do every single day with my coworkers or, with general acquaintances, even some of my closest friends, when we're just talking about surface level stuff. One of the KPIs or the metrics that I hope BucketMatch will be able to track someday is, how many people matched through BucketMatch that ended up at each other's weddings, whether as a groomsman, bridesmaid, or, or they got married together. Because I do think there's something there that you talked about where when you're really, pursuing something that's meaningful to you, that's new, that's challenging, the people that you're with, those are lifelong unbreakable bonds. And I experienced the same for, when I went cliff jumping. You talked about that, so I very comfortable with heights, very comfortable with water. But when I was out there, again, I was just sharing my bucket list. And I think you'll hear this theme over and over again. But the more I shared my goals and my dreams, the more I found like amazing opportunities and stories that I could tell later. It just so happened that a friend of mine was also in Hawaii at the same time. And he was there with one of his friends, Fee. Fee doesn't know how to swim. But when he heard that I had this idea of cliff jumping, and so we're literally jumping off of rock into water, right? He just thought, man, I've got to try it. And he knew that he had the safety net of myself and our other friend, Alex, right? Like, worst comes to worst, we'll be able to help him out. And so we get to this spot in Hawaii called China Walls. It's not an incredibly high jump, but you're jumping into open ocean and the waves come in crashing really hard. So you do have to be at least an intermediate to advanced swimmer to be comfortable. Fee watches Alex and I do it a few times, and he finally builds up the courage to do it himself. I think it helped that there were girls there as well. So he knew there was a little bit of external pressure to like, he's got to do the jump. But he did it. And I would actually, out of the three of us, he was the one raving the most about it afterwards. When we went to go get beers or whatever, got dinner, he was the one that was most excited about this experience. And it's funny because that was something on my bucket list, but I'm actually more proud that I got to help Fee overcome one of his fears. but you don't get to experience that if you don't share your goals with other people. And that's why it's so critical.
Yeah. I mean, here's what I love about you just telling the story. I literally am back on a cliff
Yeah.
with my dad and my youngest son, and both of them are like, "You're not jumping off this." I'm like, "Damn right I am," because it's awesome. And I saw locals do it yesterday, so I know it's safe, quote unquote. And I, I I love the story because you're literally putting me back in that moment. I was listening to, and yet I could see my dad, I could see my son, and them just thinking, "Well, Dad, you've lost your mind." But I love that. All
Yeah.
right, so talk to me about the celebrating failure, brother. Was there
Mhm.
a moment during your journey where you're like, God, like I don't really believe in failure, so we're clear. Like you didn't accomplish it,
Agreed.
but you don't really fail unless you quit, right? So
Agreed.
that's my
Yeah.
take on it. I'm not saying that it's just my take. But I understand what failure is, right? Like I didn't accomplish said goal, whatever that might be. I fail every day. I'm really good at
Yeah.
it. What was it for you where you were going and you're like, damn, I absolutely thought I was going to crush this and it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. In fact, man, this went completely the opposite way. Was there one moment during your journey where you're like, well, uh, didn't plan that one out the way I thought? I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
So the first thing I should say is, I tried to do 52 things for my bucket list in 52 weeks. I only successfully crossed off 32 of them. So I like to make that really clear as like, if you were to look at a test score, that's like a D minus, right? But for me, like just going and trying to do all 52, that was the mission. That was the purpose of the project. And, of course it was a transformative experience. And as we talked about, like it helped me realize that it's not the outcome that matters, it's the pursuit of it. But so, yeah, so
Mm.
I failed at 20 things on my list, right? One of the things on my bucket list is kind of a silly one. I always wanted to take a selfie with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Why? Because people tell me I look like him. I
Okay.
honestly don't really see it, but when I travel, that's the number one celebrity that I get. And so I've always just thought it'd be kind of funny whenever people say, "Hey, are you related to Joseph Gordon-Levitt?" Just pull up a picture of me and him and say, "Oh yeah, we're buddies." Even though obviously he has no idea who I am. I reached out to their team; they were very generous, but they said no. One of the things on my bucket list was to turn $1,000 into $10,000 within a 24-hour period.
Mm.
And I just thought that would be an exhilarating day. Like that's really what it comes down to. But for anyone who's familiar with compound interest, within 24 hours, if you take $1,000 and you grow by 10%, after 24 times of growing by 10%, you would have 10x your money. And so I just figured, okay, if we can find a way to just grow by 10% every hour for a 24-hour period, that would be an amazing experience. Looked into a few different ways to do that. Obviously, one easy way is buy a lottery ticket, get lucky. That's an option. Another option is you could just try to like sell, I don't know, a bunch of umbrellas in Seattle in winter when it's like pouring rain. My friends and I, we decided that we were going to go to Vegas and we were just going to try to gamble. So we picked a weekend, March Madness weekend. We knew there'd be a lot of games going on. We figured we would be able to do that 10% per hour. And, we had the perfect plan built out. I had a whole spreadsheet, everything. We had all our picks selected beforehand, really conservative picks at the beginning of the day, riskier picks at the end of the day. And probably within the first 2 hours, we were like completely off plan. Nothing went the way we expected it to. It was a complete, a total shit show. And so we ended up losing like $500 net at the end of the day. But it was an awesome weekend, man. Like it was still such a fun time. And actually the prep work for that weekend was maybe just as fun as the weekend itself. Like sitting there and analyzing and trying to put together the perfect plan. That was a blast. And, and it's a memory that we'll have forever. Would I like to be $10,000 richer? Yeah, that'd be nice. But, the experience speaks for itself.
It's so much a better story that you absolutely got your ass kicked. And actually, you didn't lose it all. So well
We didn't
done.
lose it all. Yeah.
I think the lesson here, as you said, is falling in love with the process. It's interesting. I read Atomic Habits years ago, and for whatever reason, I got called to it. So I'm reading it right now.
Nice.
And that's exactly what James Clear talks about. He's like, look, it's not about the end result. It's about the process of who you're becoming, your identity. And that's what I'm hearing in this, brother. It's like, for those of you that are like, you know what, I don't consider myself adventurous, this is a great way to embark on that and say, all right, we're going to pick a country and be there in 48 hours. Guess what? Immediately you can now identify as being adventurous. And I think there's so many great lessons inside of it. I have so many questions, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to get to them all. I'm curious of what I should have known to ask you that you're like, dude, we got to make sure. And we're not at the end of it. I'm looking at my notes right now and I'm like, I don't know how to swing this back around to make sense. So I'm just going to give you open form. What didn't I know enough to ask you, whether it be about BucketMatch, you speaking, your adventures? What is it that you really want the audience to grab from this whole conversation?
We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but something that I like to emphasize and that I've seen in BucketMatch as well is that what's really cool about publicly having a bucket list is you can see what's on other people's bucket lists that you've already done or that like you're totally good at, that you might not have thought was worthy of a bucket list, right? And I think and then of course the reverse is true as well. Like there are things that on my bucket list were so terrifying for me that for one of my friends was so easy and something that they could generally help with. And it all comes back to the people. And you know, I know we've talked about that a few times, but when you have someone else in your corner, everything just becomes easier, more efficient, more fun. And a good example of that from my project is, so, you know, I had two different things on my list. One was to learn how to play guitar, and another was to perform in front of an audience. They weren't necessarily connected at the time. I thought, you know, maybe I would do stand-up comedy or, you know, a poetry slam. Like, I don't know. The whole goal was like, let me get on stage and just like be in front of people. But I had to perform. I had done speeches. I had to like do an entertainment performance. And so when my buddy Mitchell, who's a guitar teacher, saw that one of the things on my list is to learn how to play guitar, he reached out and said, hey man, we'd be happy to, you know, give you a few free lessons. We ended up, you know, working out an actual arrangement, and I worked with him for several weeks. And he got me to the point where my definition of learn to play guitar was I need to be able to play 3 songs from memory. Like that was it. I just want to be able to 3 songs. We got to that point. Fast forward a few months, Mitchell has a show coming up. He saw that one of the things on my bucket list was to perform in front of an audience. He's like, hey, I've got a show coming up. Do you want to open for me? And of course, every ounce of my body was like, no, like I'm good. You know, like that's maybe next time, you know, but thanks for the invite. And he just responds with, no, man, like you're doing this project. You put it on your list for a reason. What better chance do you have than now to cross this off your list? I was like, damn it, Mitchell, you're right. So I did it, and I was terrified, and I'm pretty sure I blacked out during the performance. But, you know, before I started, I explained to the audience like what I was doing while I was working and gave them a heads up that it was probably going to sound pretty crappy. But what I do remember distinctly was the applause at the end. And like people were just so supportive and like so pumped. You know, and then after the show, people were coming up and talking to me. It was an incredible experience. One that I truly don't think I would have crossed off my list that year if it wasn't for Mitchell. He was the reason why. He pushed me to do it, and it's because he knew it was on my list. And for him, it's like, you know, just another Friday. But for me, it was like something that, you know, was a once in a lifetime experience.
Well, that's what, when I read kind of your bio, it was like you started BucketMatch in, I think, late 2024. Is that correct?
Yeah, we just launched in December.
And you already have 400 people, and I know this thing is going to absolutely take off. And I think you just described exactly why. It's in this world that can be very lonely at times because you're looking for like-minded people. That's not as easy to do. Like you said, at work, you're not always being vulnerable. Even in your neighborhood, it's like, I don't really have time to get to know Joe and all the, you know, what Joe's into. This is so curated to say, here's who I am. And that doesn't mean you're going to love everybody that has the same bucket list. I'm not saying that.
100%.
But you have at least one common thread, one interest that you can share. Brother, I know it's going to take off and just be amazing. I really, really think it's awesome. So I guess with that being said, if people want to find this, they want to be a part of this. They're like, yeah, man, I want to do what Jeremy did. I want to do 52 weeks. And whether I do 32, 52, it doesn't matter. Where would be the best place to connect with you?
To connect with me, I would say find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. So LinkedIn, you just search Jeremy George Bucket Match. I'll be the first one. Instagram, search the same thing, Jeremy George Bucket Match. I should show up. Also, feel free to shoot me an email, jeremy@bucketmatch.ai. I read every single response that we get. So yeah, I would love to be in touch. And if there's something on your bucket list that I can help you with, send me a note. I want to help.
I have to say, brother, you're never going to be bored doing what you do. And there's never a point you walk into a party and if people have any idea what you do, it's the easiest conversation starter of all time. What's on your bucket list? Dude, I'm using it from now on because as social as I am, you know that moment where you walk into a party and you're like, where's the bar?
Yeah.
But now I can literally, this is a question I can ask anybody. What's on your bucket list? Mm-hmm. I freaking love that, dude. I'm energized after the conversation. I'm going to go dust off mine. And I just have to say thank you, brother. It's such a cool, unique idea. And I'm just so glad you found your purpose. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And please do. And please share it with your family too, as you described, right? You know firsthand the importance of sharing that with your family and working towards it together. So, I hope you guys have some killer experiences together.
No, it's going to be for sure. So, brother, thank you for being here, sharing it. Guys, I want you to go check it out. But thank you, Jeremy. At the end of the day, I appreciate you so much.
Likewise. Thanks, JM. Thanks for having me.
Wow. I'm almost speechless on how good that episode was. Jeremy, absolutely, his list of confront mortality, catalog your dreams, recruit a partner, smart parameters, celebrate failure. I mean, yes, that's a huge lesson for your bucket list. And this is just a huge lesson in life. I definitely highlighted the three of confront mortality, catalog your dreams, and celebrate failure. I think that is 100% a philosophy to live by. He brought a lot of emotions out of me today just because I was thinking about things I didn't do with my dad on my bucket list. And here's the deal. I don't want any of you to miss out on that for your own self. So I hope you guys go check out BucketMatch. I've been on the website. It's awesome. I would also say the self community. This is 100% what it's all about. It's all about having people come on to the community and focus on themselves so that they can live their absolute best lives. And if you haven't checked it out, please do go to letsgowin.com. You can hit me up at jm@letsgowin.com. Get involved in the community. It's absolutely amazing. You have people that are keeping you accountable. They're celebrating you. That's what the self community, that's what this bucket match is all about. Such a good episode. So please share this with someone you know, love, and care about. And until next time, remember your mindset matters. I appreciate y'all. We'll talk soon.